Boom! That was very out of sync. Okay, I'm back. You're back. Very, very exciting thing, obviously. So this time, let's talk about some basic principles for effective visualization. Let's dive in. Now, these are not universal, but they're good rules of thumb. So here they are, and we'll kind of break down and work through all of them. Okay, order matters. Order is how people process your data. So, ordering is informative. Another one is put long categories on the y-axis. Want to keep scales consistent? Select meaningful colors and use meaningful, non-redundant labels. So these can be further distilled into make it easy for your viewer to see what you want them to see. And be deliberate and purposeful with your choices. And these are ways to do those two things. So let's look at some data. Here's a YouGov survey about Brexit, which is Great Britain's exit from the EU. And so in September of 2019, the survey asked over 1,600 people the following question. In hindsight, do you think Britain was right/wrong to leave the EU? And the three options were right to leave, wrong to leave, and don't know. Cool. So the most basic plot here is just those three. Those three groups as a count. But let's kind of break down those various kind of guidelines. Let's start with order mattering. So here, this is just a zoomed in or blown up version of the plot from the last slide, 2 slides ago, is that is here we're ordered alphabetically. And all we've done in ggplot is just assigned X to opinion or static to opinion using the Brexit data and smacked on a bar plot with geombar. Now, if we stare and look at this data, we can see here the don't know is the first one, right is the second one, and wrong is the third one. It's alphabetical. And that's fine, I guess, but that's not intentionally there. It's just that's the default. Does it tell us really much? No, but as you stare at this plot, in all likelihood, you started reading it from don't know to right to wrong. Now, thankfully, we have some context, but if you were just given this plot right as is, it's not very helpful. So one way to organize this plot is to order them by frequency. And we can do that with the function or the use blah 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 blah. I cannot talk today. So we can use the FCT_infreq to reorder our factors, the factor levels by frequency. So now we're ordered in descending by total count, going from wrong to right to don't know. And this at least gives us some intentional sorting. Now, it happened to be in the alphabetical version that we essentially got the flip of this. However, that was accidental and coincidental. Here, we've got a plot that shows us the most popular to least popular choices. And we've done that intentionally. We could have sorted it by frequency and got the same plot as before. However, there, we're not sorting it by alphabet. We're sorting it by frequency. They happen to be the same, but that's not a guarantee. And so again, I'm going to encourage you to be thoughtful and deliberate. Even if the end result ends up being the same as what the defaults were, go into it with purpose. Okay, so now let's clean up the labels, because the label's not super helpful. So what I've done is added the labels here, as I've highlighted in blue. So this is the same original plot, but after geom_bar, I have added in plus and then a couple new lines with lab. They're highlighted in bright blue here, which it's not showing up exactly how I want it, because this is harder to read, hence I'm highlighting it. But here we've relabeled X as opinion in all caps, as well as Y as count in all, or not in all caps, but in title case. So in both these cases, we have a consistent formatting, and if we scroll back, instead of having count be lowercase and function of infrequency being in the title of that axis, we have that here. Now you will notice that I was lazy and did not update this plot, so now it's in reverse, and that's just how it's gonna be today. Okay, so now again, I'm gonna plot these data looking at the count by region. Again, alphabetical order, not ideal. It really doesn't tell us much of anything. We got London, Midlands and Wales, the North, the rest of the South, and Scott, which I assume is Scotland, but we don't know technically. Again, it's not ideal. So let's actually reorder our factors manually so that we don't have to keep releveling them. So here we are going to use factor underscore relevel, which reorders factors using a custom order. So here I've highlighted that function, and what we're doing is we're essentially assigning region to be region, but ordered by London, the rest of the South, Midlands/Wales, the North, and then Scott. We haven't changed the variable names. We'll do that later. But here, what we've done is intentionally reordered our labels so that the default is at least not just alphabetical. So now we have at least it slightly. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so now we have it at least plotted this way, where we've sorted the number of voters who have any kind of opinion by region. You'll notice the labels are no longer tidy. And that's because I'm only adding one thing at a time. All right. Okay, so now we're going to clean up our labels. So we've already reordered them, but now we're going to reassign them. We're going to reassign London to actually spell London. Rest of the South, we're going to actually put it into sentence case. Same with Midlands and Wales. We're going to give them meaningful names. And then when we plot them, they look nice. And we don't think that we've got a lot of people named Scott voting. So it's cleaner. So that's the first kind of pro tip of think about your categories. So long categories are hard to read. So this is literally the same plot. Cool. So what we can do is flip them. We can either do this by adding coordinate flip. As we can see right here, it has just rotated everything. And that's kind of nice. And now we have more space to look at our variables and read them kind of more easily. We can also do this by assigning region to Y instead of X. These give the exact same code, and sometimes it may be easier to just reassign Y to X. Other times, maybe you had your plots very complicated and you just don't want to mess with anything because there's lots of recoding to be done. That's where I recommend just tossing in the coordinate flip at the end. They are both ways to get the exact same plot. Cool. So let's also just reverse those levels, because we want London to be first for some reason. So here we use the factor reverse function, fct underscore rev, and it reverses the default order of the factors. So we maintain our ordering that we liked before, and we have those longer strings in a more easily readable format. So let's clean up these labels. And we do that by assigning X and Y under labels. So we've cleaned up count to say count, and region to say region. Okay, so that's the first two. Third is pick a purpose. So here I've made a cool segmented bar plot, but it's really hard to read. While it's nice that we've broken down the opinions by region, it you gotta stare at it for a while to like really figure out what is happening as I've zoomed in here. Because what a segmented bar plot does is, while it maintains the total volume of votes, so the counts are the same, but we've got essentially proportions within those bar counts, so we can see both the proportion and the magnitude of the effect. But, well, it's not super helpful. So here we've plotted it by facet, so that we can see by region without having to really struggle to break these up visually. So, like, to see how the relative proportions are, you kind of have to visualize in your mind's eye what these two stacks would look like next to it. Here, we've done that for you to save you the kind of mental gymnastics. This not super great because we got all this color stuff happening that's just adding noise. We can't really read shit. But facets are a way to illustrate your groupings, if that is what you intend to have your audience focus upon. Here I've zoomed in a little, and so we can see, in theory, but not that well, that Scotland and London really wanted to stay in the EU, and everybody else not so much. So let's cut back. So here I've trimmed down all the redundancy because the colors weren't adding anything; they were just making it hard to read. And in this case, that redundancy probably a good choice to cut. But redundancy can also tell a good, helpful story. But here, instead of breaking the colors up by region, which we've already done with the faceting, we've broken the colors up by opinion so that we can see the various heights across groupings without having to really think about which is which. This is a helpful redundancy So sure, we do have this information already, but an extra layer can make it easier without detracting. You can add layers if they help your story, if they help with interpretation, if they make it so your reader can more quickly get to the point that you are trying to convey, then great. But if they make it harder, like this, because then you have to figure out like where right and wrong is. This one does not help us untangle what is happening. While this one does. Or at least I think it does a little. As I've zoomed in here. Now obviously there needs to be some tweaking and scaling and adjustments. But this is kind of at least a middle of the road draft. So we can be selectively redundant. We don't have to have this label in here because we have opinion labeled over here. So we can just remove our guide. So some selective removal can be helpful if it gives you more space to see your effect. Now, I don't recommend deleting things for the sake of just not having them there, but if there are costs, so having this legend is costly because it is taking up other space. Here, by removing this legend, we still have that information because it is in the labeling on the axis. However, we can now spread it out a little more and use up more surface area so that we can see some of the differences in magnitude. As I've zoomed in to show you. Okay, so maybe it'd be helpful to have some informative labels because right now, unless I told you, or you wouldn't know that this had anything to do with Brexit. Thankfully, I told you, but all we can see here is counts and regions that are probably in the UK, but we don't have a ton of context. So let's add informative labels. Here, we've got the survey question, and we've added it here as a title. Was Britain right/wrong to leave the EU? And we've removed our X and Y axis. That's what these are. We'll talk a little more about those later. But what we've done here is added information and context so that we can interpret what is happening. So let's add a little bit more info. Let's add some more information. So we can add a subtitle and captions. So we have give our readers even more context. Now, this caption here is a little long, but let's at least take a look. Yeah. So subtitle, great. It gives us a little more information on when these data were collected, how they were collected, and all that. But this subtitle here, this source, not helpful because it overwhelms the graph and it's not very informative. Like, you can't even copy it. It's so long, and you don't want to type it up. So we can do a little better by changing our caption to say source and then using a short URL. So now it doesn't overwhelm. And if we were to go to this URL, it would give us some more information. It would give us a link to the data and all that. You're welcome to check it out. But this plot gives us a lot more information and context without costing us much of anything. But let's fix up those labels because, oh, hello. Okay. Well, in theory, we would fix up these facet labels and make them smaller so you could read them. And this code should do that. However, it does not seem to be showing that code right now. And um, I am going to leave that as an exercise for you, if you would like, to see what that looks like. So now let's select some meaningful colors. Rainbow, not always super helpful. While it may be fabulous, just so fabulous, it doesn't help us focus at all. We got the red and the pinky red, the green. These are the default colors in ggplot. And I've zoomed in here. They do convey information, but they're not so easy on the eyes. And if anyone is colorblind, these might not be super helpful. And obviously, the example I'm about to give, not super helpful to the colorblind, but we can assign colors manually using scale fill. And while the defaults aren't helpful, here, yes, they're not super great. We've picked red for wrong, green for right, and then gray for don't know in order to emphasize the kind of the difference in opinion and downplay the don't know. So the don't know is still there, but it doesn't get as much weight compared to those with an opinion. But we can choose better colors. And I actively encourage you to check out Color Brewer. There's just lots to crawl into here, so I encourage you to check it out. These are a good place to start. So Color Brewer, super helpful. So here I've grabbed a couple of themes. I've made this blue and this blue-orange color distinction, and you can just grab the colors here. There's also a Color Brewer library that has these built in, but we can see this plot doesn't make our eyes bleed. In theory, it's colorblind friendly. But I would check with your friends and also consider adding another layer of information, like a texture, so that if this goes grayscale, you can still read it, as can our colorblind brethren. So you'll notice that we have some gray in the background. It's fine, but we can add a theme on top of this, such as minimal, which tidies it up quite nicely and just removes as much chart junk as possible. Now, there are many different themes, and I realize that I've used chart junk here but not explained it. There's some written material on chart junk. Essentially, remove everything that is not helpful so that your eyes don't bleed. Now, that is in direct contention with adding extra dimensions to make sure that your plot is viewable in various forms. These are tensions that are unresolvable. I mean, you can resolve them, you have to make your choices. And here's where I struggled with ggplot. In theory, we would see these beautiful plots next to each other. We would. Unfortunately, I cannot get them to do that, and I've tried many, many clever ways. So you will have to use your imagination to see that these plots are indeed different. Cool. So now it's your turn. I want you to play with the Brexit data. And I want you to try and play around with these visualizations in at least 3 different ways to tell slightly different stories with each. It's a good exercise. I'm biased, but I think it's good. Cool. So one last thing, just to show you some other cool stuff. There are other built-in scales. The Vertis scale is really nice for ordinal data. Just as an easy way so you don't have to go to the Color Brewer website. But if you want to, it's here. So go check it out. It's pretty neat. And it gives us high contrast. Oh yeah, let's clean up those labels. Now we can read them. Pretty nice. So that's it. I'll see you all later. Bye.